Okay. Welcome, folks, to the session on building AI workflow skills. Today's session is potentially going to is mostly going to focus on trying to understand what what a skill file is, how it actually works, and how it can help you with your workflows as you are working with artificial intelligence tool. When we are saying AI tools, we are mostly talking about the large language model or the language model ones, such as the ChatGPT, the Claude, the most recent ones that have been made famous. Now, before I start the session, I do want to say a couple of things. If you are joining through the web interface, just keep in mind that some of the features that you get on the Zoom desktop, you may not be able to get on the Zoom web. We have tried fixing it on our end, but it's more of a Zoom feature capability issue. So you might have issues in seeing the share screen. So keep that in mind, it's better to use the Zoom client for the session. Okay, awesome. So we're gonna get this going. Just to do a very quick introduction about ourselves. Welcome to Chill and Skill. So this is a meetup group that has been created by my partner Avneet, who is also here. She is a co-host, and myself. My name is Madhav. The purpose of this space is to sort of create events where we learn some skills in a chill manner, in an interactive manner, and in a very first principles manner. So that's what we are going to hope today's session is going to be about. Now, this particular event is called AI Saturdays. This is a weekly event where we sort of pick up an interesting topic in the domain of artificial intelligence, and then we do a session on breaking down the concepts, explaining it to people, answering any questions. Now, uh, all different levels of people are welcome here. If you're a beginner, that's fine. If you are somebody who is an expert, that's fine. I'm sure everybody will learn something. We do like to make this interactive. So there will be times for you folks to ask questions. Just I think that we are all here learning together. And so we all can learn from each other's experiences. And each week it's a different topic. As I said today, my topic was specific to large language models in AI and specific to how do you use skill files for automating your workflows and what are they actually useful for. Now, I do want to sort of reiterate this that before we start, let's make sure that we create a safe space to learn. This is a space to learn, and this is a space where there's no judgment. The idea is so that we all can take away a learning from here. We understand that there's a lot going on outside in the world, and sometimes like those things can impact, but it's important for us to create a kind and a safe place here. Um, if there are individuals who are being disruptive, we are going to be putting them out of the meeting, and also we are going to be blocking them off. So I would love everybody to be kind, be patient, assume good faith, and sort of create a healthy environment for everyone. Okay, now before we get into the session, it will be good to sort of introduce yourself on Zoom chat. I'll introduce myself first. My name is Madhav. I'm co-founder of Curio Skill. It's a Canadian skill training company, and this meetup group is a part of our work. I also have my co-founder and partner Avneet here as well. I'll be the primary facilitator, and Avneet would be here to answer any questions or to provide any support during the session. Now, I'm going to ask folks to please introduce yourself on Zoom chat. Tell us your name, what do you do, and maybe tell us what is the one thing that you want to take away from today. I'm going to give it a few minutes or maybe a minute for people to quickly introduce themselves. And people can just write it on Zoom chat. Hey, Rashpal, welcome. And nice. Lead architect, super cool. Hey, Carla. Hey, Kenny. Hey, Zach. Hey, Mahak. Hey, Carlos. Hey, Ravinder. Hey, Dean, you want to learn about collecting AI workflows? Nice. Yeah, keep the introductions going, folks. I may not be able to read everybody's name. A lot of people are here, but this is cool. I'm gonna maybe let everyone just quickly introduce themselves. Nice. Health informatics, nice. Okay, amazing. We have a bunch of folks from across the domains. That's pretty cool. Okay, I'll give it maybe 10 more seconds and then I'll get it going. Okay, awesome. We are seeing a lot of introductions, folks. Thanks a lot, folks, for introducing yourself. This is awesome. Now, as we get into the main content of the session, the one thing that I'm going to mention is that you can ask me questions on Zoom chat anytime. I will try and answer them as soon as possible as the session is going. Now, the idea of this session is that I do want to take a lot of time making sure that the concepts are understandable to people. So if something is unclear, feel free to like ask a question. I will try my best to explain things in a very like broken down manner and to provide a sort of a detailed explanation of things. It is going to be a semi-technical session. We are going to see you will see me do some demos as well. So hopefully they will also help. And at the end of the session, we'll tell you how we sort of share the slides and the video that we will share after the session. Okay, amazing job, folks. Awesome. Okay, so we are going to do five different essential things that we are going to talk about today. The first thing that we are going to talk about is what a workflow skill is. The next thing that we're going to talk about is what makes one work, like what does it mean to create a good skill. Then I'm going to show you guys how to write one. I'm going to run a live skill just to show you what its use cases are. And then we are going to talk about the three main language model tools, which is Claude, Gemini, and ChatGPT, how you can actually run those skills there. Okay, so let's first understand what a workflow skill is. And this is a very important aspect to understand. Now, the first thing I would say is skill is a very specific word in the world of large language models or language models, especially in the world of AI. Now, the concept was coined by Anthropic, but it has become sort of an open standard. I'll talk about this a little bit more. But the idea of a skill was you are giving a capability to your language model to do something. So that was essentially the mental model here. Just like all of us have different skills. Like for example, when I like I know how to cook food, I know how to do online research, I know how to do write code. Now, all of those skills essentially are something that I have. The idea of a skill in the concept of a language model is that you are sort of taking that skill and you're giving it to your language model, whether you are using ChatGPT, whether you are using Gemini, or whether you are using Claude, so that it is able to do that skill with the same level of quality as I am doing. Now, I am going to be switching to Excelli to explain a few more concepts. Okay, now you might ask, why did this sort of concept come into the picture? Now, let me just expand this a little bit. Now, typically, when people are using any sort of a large language model tool, let's assume that a lot of us are using ChatGPT, and I don't endorse a tool. I'm just using it as an example. Let's say I am a user. This is, let's say, me, and let's say when I am using ChatGPT, oftentimes people are using ChatGPT in a task-based manner. So a task-based manner can be, I might go to ChatGPT and be like, okay, write me an email. Or I might go and tell ChatGPT to be like, tell me about jobs in Canada. So now all of these prompts are sort of individual tasks that oftentimes people go to a ChatGPT and ask it to do. Now, the big difference between what difference between a skill is, and I'll just extend this here. A skill essentially is a mixture of different tasks all combined together in a logical way. Now, let me sort of try to explain that in an example. Let's say I go to ChatGPT and say, okay, tell me about the jobs in Canada. It will give me an answer. It will sort of run it. It will sort of like understand. It will sort of find some sort of a data and it will give me an answer. Now, if I have a skill, like if I build a skill which is more dedicated to doing online research, then that skill will not just be a simple prompt. It will have a series of steps, which you can also call tasks, which will make sure that the output of that particular big prompt is actually right. Now, let's say I am somebody who has before the world of large language model a manual process of, let's say, doing online research. Now, in that situation, let's say I had a process like the first thing I would do is gather sources. Another thing that I might do is maybe summarize them. And then after I've summarized them, let's say I had a third step where let's say, wrote down a report. Let's say this is something before the LM world, before the language model world, I used to do manually. I was good at it. I could go online, gather some sources. I knew what specific sources are good for this sort of research. I knew how I wanted to summarize. I knew how I wanted to write report. Now, when you want your LLM to be able to do all of that together, that's what formulates a skill. Essentially, what you're going to do is rather than just giving it a prompt like, tell me about jobs in Canada, you are going to go and tell your language model that, okay, I want you to do this research, but I want you to do it in a step by step manner. So the first thing would be, okay, gather valid sources and let's gather valid forces. The second thing would be summarize the data. And the third thing might be write a report in an A, comma B, comma C manner. So I hope people can see the difference here. The big difference here is when you are giving a one-off task for your LLM to do, that it will be able to do a decent job of sort of breaking it down into specific things. But when we say that we have built a skill is a more disciplined series of steps. And the reason why that is important is because we want a good quality output. So oftentimes those series of steps are governed by experts in the field. So let's say I am an expert in doing online research. So I might want my LLM to do a series of steps that will really help do the online research in a much more effective manner rather than just giving it a one-off task of tell me about jobs in Canada. So that's the first key difference. Typically, when you are prompting to your LLM or ChatGPT, let's say, you are sort of doing one-off tasks. But when you are doing a skill has a series of more disciplined procedural steps that allows your language model to do certain steps in for ensuring higher quality. Now, I am going to pause here. I'm going to look at if there are any questions. I think, yeah, people have asked about the recording, and yeah, there's a very diverse group of people. Yeah, Miranda, like we love like having people from different places. Now, I'm gonna pause. Any questions? I see someone has their hand up. I'm gonna unmute you for a second, Dean, if you wanna ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you. For the skills, those steps that you put in, do we have to write those steps out each time we want the AI to do the skill?
No, we don't. So let's say you write the skill for a generalized thing. So you won't make a skill of fine, tell me about jobs in Canada. You will write a skill for doing online research, and then you would run that skill against a particular task. So you might say that run this online research skill for telling me about jobs in Canada. I'm going to ask you to unmute. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so like after doing it the initial time, let's say I want to do it again 2 weeks later, how do I get it to run that particular skill? Just say run this research skill?
Yeah, run the research skill again, and it will run it. I'll show you in the last section for the major three tools, what's the best way to run the skill.
Okay, thank you.
Great question, Dean. Okay, I got a couple of other questions. Okay, amazing questions. What is an agent? And then there's a difference between an agent and an LLM. Okay, that's a great question. So I'll quickly break that down because again, and I think Kenneth has sort of answered it a little bit, but I can quickly explain what the difference is. Let's go back here. And I hope this also helps the rest of the people. Okay. So when we say LLM, right? Let's look at the word large language model, or more generally, let's say a language model. It might be large, it might be small. Think of this as the brain, right? A language model essentially is just the brain. It is the artificial intelligence thing that we built using neural networks and deep learning that is actually able to converse in natural language, that is able to reason about things, that is able to do like basically do a lot of cognitive tasks. Now, when it becomes an agent is when this model has access to external tools. So an external tool can be doing a search on the internet. It might be getting some information from a database. It might be sending a message to someone, like any kind of an external tool or any kind of an external resource. So when the brain combined with these additional things, then it sort of becomes an agent. So the way I sort of explain it is, think of the human body, right? We have a brain, but in isolation, the brain can only do so much. It needs the hands, it needs the voice, it needs the eyes. So an agent essentially has the language model as the brain, but everything else that allows it to interact with the natural world, with the digital world, all of that combined together makes it into an agent. Gemini Notebook is an agent because it has a language. So the question was, is it something like the Gemini Notebook? Yes. So Gemini Notebook is an agent. It has the language model behind the scenes, but it also has access to external tools and data that it can interact with in the world. Let me know, folks, if I answered your question. Any other questions, folks, till this point? Okay, amazing. So, like I said, now this is related to the question that Dean was asking. Um, you don't have to like keep rewriting the skill over and over. Once you are able to write a skill, which is a specialized workflow of doing something, you can then sort of apply it for different contexts. So the simplest example that I give is, let's say I have created a skill, which basically has is for doing online research. Now, I can use it for doing online research for finding a shoe, finding a good shoe. I can use it for doing online research on political parties. I can use it for doing online research on any number of different things. The skill remains the same. And I always use the human analogy, just like we have certain skills like writing and reading, but we can apply it in different contexts. So once you create that skill, then you can run it in different contexts. I see another question. Is there any structure or framework to build an agent? Yes. So there are a lot of structures and frameworks. We are not covering them today, but yes, there are a lot of different frameworks that you can do for building an agent. Today, we are mostly focused on skill. Kenneth has mentioned some of them. Agno, Google ADK. There is a lot of that technical stuff. Okay, amazing. Now, when we are trying to sort of create a skill, right? A skill is a specialized workflow for doing something with a large language model. There are a few things to keep in mind when you are building that skill because and folks, all of this I am going to demo very quickly to sort of in the second half of the session so that you folks can actually see what a skill actually looks like. Now, when you are creating a skill, there are a few things to keep in mind because when you are giving a one-off task to your LLM, that's sort of like a very like simplistic one thing for it to do. But when you are creating a skill that is a bundle of different tasks, that is very, very like that's a lot. You're giving it a lot more responsibility almost. So there are some key features that are important for your skills. I do want to answer one of the questions. What's the difference between skill and the tools? Great question, Soumya. A skill is a way for the model to actually attempt to do a task. It might use different tools. So let's say first step of my skill is go to the internet and search Google. So then it will use the internet search tool. So tool can become a part of the skill, but skill is your higher order procedure that the language model or the agent should follow for doing something. Yeah, and Kenneth, I think I get what you are sort of saying, but that's more of like I would say a technical answer. But I think from a first principle standpoint, that's the core difference. A skill is a procedure of doing things, whereas like a tools are very specific things that the skill can use for doing that particular procedure. Soumya, let me know if that answered your question. Okay, awesome. So we were talking about what are the things that are needed to be part of the skill. So there are three key aspects that we are going to talk about today. The first key aspect is when you are asking an agent like ChatGPT or Google Notebook or whatever you are using to actually run a skill, it's not just doing one task, it is doing a lot of tasks together. So the first thing that you want is you want that skill to be interactive. You don't want it to be like, oh, it has done the entire thing, it has utilized all your tokens, and then at the end of the day, it gives you a result which is complete crap, and then you have to start from the beginning. That's always like the one very key thing that I keep in mind is, and I always take a human analogy. Let's say if I as a human, I have a skill of doing research online. I'm not gonna just do it in one go. I might look at some resources first, then take a break, go for a coffee, talk to someone, get some feedback, and then move on to the next step. Obviously, an LM agent is not gonna be going for coffee, but the idea is the same, that you want it to not do the entire thing end to end. You want it to take a break, ask you, is it on the right track? Am I going wrong? Get your confirmation and only then move on. Because the skill has a bunch of tasks all together, and you don't want it to be like, oh, it has finished the 10 tasks, and in the end, what it gives you is wrong, and then it has to start all over again. So that's the first part. The skill should be interactive and it should be asking you at key points whether is it in the right direction, is it doing the right thing, and if it's not doing the right thing, it should then take a step back and then try and answer that. Now, the second key thing, and this is a very, very important part, folks, when we are talking about building a skill, um, it needs to keep an internal record of what it has done. Now, the reason why this is important, and I'm going to stress this many, many times, when you are giving a skill a longer workflow for a large language model to do, and let's say it asks you questions, it is an interactive skill, it is you are cognitively offloading your task to a language model. And so you do want to keep a record of what all it did so that later on you can go back and sort of like go back and then you can like actually take a look what the model was doing. Now, this is almost like, you know how as humans we sometimes maintain a reflection journal. Let's say I have a skill of dancing, and let's say I prepared a particular choreography, I performed the choreography, and I got to the end. But oftentimes people would keep like a reflection record so that they can look back at it and basically learn from it and find any mistakes that they did. That's the same idea here. A skill should make the language model keep a reflection record that, okay, first I did this, this is how it went, this is how it did not went. So that record is something that can help you to sort of go back and double check that, okay, what was the model thinking? Why did it make certain results? So first thing, make a skill that's interactive. Second part, make sure that it is keeping a record. And the third very, very key part that I often sorry talk about, which is sort of connected to keeping a record, is that it needs to a skill should tell, like the model should always tell you when it doesn't know something. Because in the landscape of writing a skill, you are writing a lot of like different tasks together. There might be a task where the model doesn't know. It doesn't know what it is saying. It might be getting the wrong information. And so you have to make sure that the model calls it out that, okay, this is a step that I don't know how to do. Help me do it. So it's very important. And this is also true when you are doing a task with a chat GPT as well, simple task as well. It should not just give you a vague answer. It should try and point it out that I don't know, maybe help me through it. So a skill also, while it is maintaining its own log of what it is doing, should tell you that, okay, I don't really know uh, about this particular step. Help me do this. Now, the third aspect, and now this is sort of like let's say a controversial opinion sometimes, because I know that a lot of conversations right now are like having the agents or the AI agents do the entire thing. But I do want to emphasize that a skill should pause where there is a need for a human to make a decision. The reason for that is oftentimes these skills are very long important workflows. Let's say if I'm doing online research and let's say I'm doing it for a presentation that I have to give to my company's board tomorrow, there might be places where as a human I have to make sure that I have to like I have to like guide the skill in the right way. There might be compliance things that only I am aware of. I have that institutional knowledge. And so if there are any real decisions, the skill should basically make sure that it knows it, you have written it in the skill that this is an important thing. At this point, pause and ask the human, am I doing the right thing? So it's important thing that like a skill, and it sort of connects to the interactivity point, that the skill should interact with the human who is running the skill, and it should allow the human to actually like give it the inputs where it is needed, and the skill should already have it as a part of that. Now, I'm going to ignore this for a second because you will sort of understand this like a little bit more when I show you guys the skill. But just to recap, the core idea that I want to bring up is a skill is a larger workflow that your LLM or your AI agent like ChatGPT is doing. If you are giving it a skill to run, make it interactive, make sure that it is keeping a reflection journal of what it has done, the language model has done. It should be pointing out what it doesn't know, and then if there is any very critical decision, those should be done by the human rather than the model itself, so that the human has that oversight. Now, I am going to pause. Any questions till now? There's one question. It might be a loaded question, but where does the hardware come into play when using models, local hardware versus data center hardware? I wanted to see how feasible it is to keep everything offline versus online. Fahad, that's a great question. We did a session on this a few weeks back. There are totally ways of running this. Uh, there are totally ways of running this on your own system. And we did a session on running local language models. It does depend on the hardware of your system, what you are able to do. But I would also say that there is a lot of innovation happening in the models, which is essentially making the models smaller. So it is going to, in my opinion, get a little easier in the long run to actually run this stuff on your own system. But we aren't fully there yet. There are some free models that are smaller in size that are available that you can run on your system. I hope that answers your question, Fahad. Sorry, is ChatGPT an agent or LLM? Sorry, it is still a bit confusing. Yeah, so I'm gonna give a very straight answer. ChatGPT is an agent. It is powered by the GPT model. So the way I look at it is, let's go back to my Excalibur, and I hope this sort of like explains it. I'm just going to use OpenAI as an example. This is OpenAI. OpenAI in the background has built the brain. They call it the GPTs. So their most recent one is GPT-5. That's the brain. ChatGPT is an agent that is built on top of this GPT-5 that has extra stuff that it can do. You know that ChatGPT can search the internet, it can write presentations, all of that. So essentially, so ChatGPT itself is an agent whose brain is GPT-5, which is the model that OpenAI has, and then it has additional things that it can do. Let me know, Meng, if I answered your question. I got another question from Steve. What is a markdown file? Oh, yeah. So, Steve, I'm going to explain that in approximately 5 minutes, maybe, what a markdown file is and how it actually works. And I'll explain why it is important. So, give me a couple of minutes. I got another question. How does the skill logs the info? Should we use different platform? Not really, Soumya. Your log can just be purely text files that the skill makes the model create. So it can be that the model is writing the overall answer that you want, while and at the same time the model is also creating a log on the side. You don't need a fancy platform for it. There are fancy platforms that do exist. I'm not going to say that, but you don't necessarily need it. It can be a very simple log. Okay, I'm going to give it 10 more seconds if people have more questions. I think there was one question that I saw. Somebody wanted to know what a harness is. Okay, So I do want to sort of just give a quick disclaimer. There is a lot of terminology going around in the AI world that's confusing, but they are oftentimes very, very like simple concepts. A harness is essentially the same idea as this, where you have a model and the model has different tools that it can access. And sometimes the harness also has skills. That's what we are going to look at today. But think of a harness as sort of a bucket of everything. It has a model as its brain, it has tools that it uses, it has skills that it can do. So that's how I would define it. So it's just like an overall package of an AI agent, essentially. Let me know, Kapil, if I answered your question. Asif said, so is this agent that you are now going to create, is it similar like GPT-5 or different? So Asif, unfortunately, I am not that good to create a brain like GPT-5. That will require a lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning stuff. I'm not creating an agent, I'm creating a skill, which is a workflow of doing something that an agent can run. So the skills can be used with existing agents like ChatGPT, but I won't be the one who will be like creating that agent right now. That's a separate session that we'll probably do someday. Um, okay. Great questions, folks. I love the questions. I love all the different angles that people are thinking of it from. I'm going to give it 10 more seconds before we uh, go next. How will it pick the tool based on the skill? How will we validate the skill? Kirthana, I'm going to talk about it when I show you the skill and how to think about the skill. You're just a little jumped ahead, but we'll get there. Okay, awesome. Now, let's now talk about how do we actually write this damn skill that I have been sort of talking about, right? And now I'm gonna like sort of give a very, very dumb example of how you go about writing a skill. And then I will also show you what is that example based on. Now, let's go back to my Excelly draw. Okay, so there are a few key things for people to know when you are writing a skill. The first, and yeah, so I actually want to take a moment to what Steve said. I noticed different AI apps seem to use different terms, which makes things confusing to me. I agree, which is why I call this session workflow skills, because essentially a skill is just a series of steps that a model should take. You can run it on Claude, you can run it on ChatGPT or Gemini. That term skill was introduced by Anthropic, so they were the one who popularized it. But essentially, it's just a very big prompt that has a series of steps for a model to take. I'll show in the end how you can sort of use it in an interoperable way. Okay, awesome. So, what is essentially a skill? So, the first couple of things to sort of keep in mind when you are writing a skill is at the end of the day, it is a plain language prompt. So, that's the first key thing. There is nothing like super fancy about it. It's just a plain language prompt. So, you might write it in English, you might write it in whatever language you use your chat GPT on. But at the end of the day, a skill is just a plain language prompt. It's a very big prompt, but it is a plain language prompt. Now, the second thing to keep in mind is that skills are long running workflows. So, what that means is a workflow can be doing online research, another workflow can be creating a presentation. So, a skill basically takes something that's going to take a series of steps to do and breaks it down into a plain language prompt. Now, when the standard of a skill was written, there was a conversation about where does one actually write the skill. Now, the easiest way would be you start writing it here, and then you sort of like create a huge prompt here, and then essentially it is able to run that. Now, that is a little clunky because like how do you like you want a way to be able to reuse that skill across platforms. You want to be able to sort of share that skill with someone else. That is where came the concept. And folks, I'm going to pause if this is by any chance confusing, of a markdown file. Now, a markdown file, and I'll show you guys in one moment what this is. A markdown file is basically a simple text file. Okay, I'll show you guys in one moment what it is with some formatting. Now, you know how when you are using Google Docs, let's say I go to Google Drive and let's say I create a new Google Doc. And when you create a new Google Doc, you are able to do all of this stuff, right? You can make it bold, you can create a heading. There's a lot of stuff that you can do. That's the same concept with the Markdown file. A Markdown file is a simple text file, but it has some very bare bones formatting that you can do in it. Now, the reason why this format became important, that's because A, it's a simple text file, you can just write into it. The second is because it has some formatting, it allows you to make the file sort of have headings and bold and underline and all of that jazz. So Markdown file allows you to write your prompt with proper headings, with maybe if you want to use a table, let's say you want to use external links. So it makes it a little easier to write more complicated prompts, which is a little hard to do just here. Because if I have to create a table here, that will be very, very annoying. It will be very, very hard to do. And so if I want my prompt to use a table, or if I wanted to even use like an external image, all of that is a lot easier inside a Markdown file because it has a very simple way of setting it up. Now, Markdown by itself is not a new way of writing this. There is an entire standard that was written by the open source community to create Markdown files. I'm going to share a link to that on Zoom chat. But basically, I'll show you what a Markdown file actually looks like so that you can sort of see. But essentially, it's a very basic way of writing formatted text using simple plain text. Now, I do see there is a message. In Gemini AI Studio, there is an option to add system instructions. Those custom prompt, is that a skill or something else? Great question, Fahad. That is where you put a skill. So in the world of Gemini, the custom prompts that you can put in, that is where you can put in a skill. So that's where I would put it as well. Okay, let me know if I answered your question. Okay, amazing. So let me show you folks how a markdown file actually looks like. Let's just ignore this for a second. I'm just gonna close this. Let's say I want to create a markdown file. Let's call it test markdown, just to sort of show you what this is. And markdown files have an extension called .md. So I can just put an extension .md here. Now, you might ask what this is. So this is Visual Studio Code, which is the thing that I use for writing Markdown files. You can write a Markdown file on Google Docs as well. You can write a Markdown file on Obsidian if people know how to use that. But basically, you can like sort of do it in any of in 100 different ways. You can write it on Notepad. Now, when you are writing a markdown file, you can, like I said, give it a little formatting. So let's say if I want to give it a heading, all I have to do is put two hashes and let's say this is my heading, and then I can write something here. Now, what ends up happening is because the markdown file has these special characters that give it formatting, if I use something like this, which is like a previewer of a markdown file, then it will show up with all the formatting. So you can see that it's a heading, you can see there is a line after it, and you can see there is a text after it. But in the most simplest format, it's just a text file with specific formatting that you can add. Let's say if I wanted to make something bold, I think use #B or something. There are specific ways of actually sort of giving it a specific word bold. I'm sure I can find something here. Yep. So you use 2 stars for making something bold. So if I copy this, I go back here, I go back here, I save this. If I click on preview, you will see that it is now in a bold format. But at the end of the day, a markdown file is just a simple, like a text file with formatting in it. Now, the reason why that formatting is super useful, that's because rather than having to, rather than just writing simple text, I can add headings and bold and tables, and that can help guide the language model a lot better. Now, I am going to pause and I'm just going to make sure that I'm not missing anything. And again, this is not a tutorial on Markdown, so you can find very good tutorials. But basically, if you look at this, and this is like an early preview into an actual skill, you can see like I have sort of written it in Markdown file. And as you can see, like it has the skill has a name, it has online research as the heading, it has a process inside of it. So you can use these formattings to tell the language model a little bit better what are the important things that it needs to look at, how is the structure of that particular prompt. So it gives a lot more structure to your prompt than a simple text does. Now, I do want to show you folks actually a skill that I wrote just to sort of show you how it works. But before I go there, I am going to pause. Any questions? I'm going to give it 1 more minute. I'm also going to take a 1 minute break. Do we have any rule to write skill? Yeah, and we don't have a rule, Kirthana, but we have a standard. I'm going to show you guys what's the default standard of creating skills. Great question, though. I'm going to wait for 30 more seconds if any more questions. Model to model. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, skill can be transferred from model to model 100%. Fahad. Can a skill call an API multiple times? For sure. Again, the skill is not calling the API, the model and the agent is. So if the skill is telling the agent to call API multiple times, it will. I wouldn't like to do it because it might create some errors around it. But yeah, you can totally write a skill that tells the agent. And folks, keep this in mind to Pratik's question. A skill is just a prompt. The model and the agent are the ones who are running that prompt. And so they are the ones who will do all the external things. In any language like Python, I got a question from Soumya. Can we write the skill in any language like Python? Um, I'm sure you can write a skill, but the skill is supposed to give instructions to the agent. If you have written your Python code in a way that the agent will be able to infer what you wanted to do, sure. But typically, skills are not for specific for programming. They are for anybody who wants to give a long running task to the agent to do. Let me know if I answered your question. Nowadays, people seem to want to split a workflow too granularly and get several skills for several pieces of a workflow instead of it being a single skill. Any thoughts about that? Absolutely. I think that sometimes, so let's say online research, that's the one I'm going to show today. That's a big skill. So that makes sense to be a skill. But let's say if I break down every small step into its own skill, that might be a little bit too much. Again, it depends on the context. What I typically say is try to do it away and then keep evaluating it. That's a key part that I'm going to show you guys and talk about. That your skill is not going to get written in one time. You have to use it, evaluate it, and then keep improving it. If a skill evolves over time, is it versioned? Absolutely, Golnaz. So that's one of the reasons why we want to write these skills in a markdown file so that we can maintain versions of them. And then oftentimes the skill sort of evolves after getting feedback. So can I write skill for specific job search and use with ChatGPT? Absolutely, SNN. You can totally write a skill for job search and then try it out, see if it actually works. If it doesn't work, improve it and then run it on ChatGPT. I love these questions, folks. Okay, amazing. Now, I do want to sort of show a skill that I wrote. And I'm going to show you what I wrote as a skill. Then I will also show you the standard that I'm following for writing that skill. And that standard you don't have to necessarily follow, but it has some really good recommendations. So the skill that I wrote was basically this. Essentially, uh, sorry, I got a question. Can you ask ChatGPT to write skills for you? For sure. If you want to go to meta level, for sure, you can like ask the large language model to write you a skill. But I do usually say that a skill requires more of a human thinking at times because the experts might be human that you are trying to like now ask the language model to do. So I wouldn't fully rely on an agent. I would take feedback from actual human experts, talk to them, understand how they would do things, and then sort of encode it into the model. I wouldn't totally rely on that. Let me know, PL, if I answered your question. Okay, awesome. So this is a skill that I wrote. I will show you how I wrote it and why I use that standard. I'll try and run it as well. Hopefully that goes fine. And then I will show you guys the specification that helps you write the skills. So I wrote a skill for doing online research. I sort of wanted to create a skill. I took what I do, like what I do manually, and I converted that into a skill. So typically what I do is I figure out what is it that I want to do research on. Then I review the sources of where I'm going to research on. Then I do my own logging. Then I usually check my own work, and then I have a final thing. So I sort of took what I find is a good mature process of doing online research, and I thought it will be a good idea to convert it into a skill. So I'm going to go away from here. Now I'm going to go here. So I created that skill as a markdown file. I put it inside this research folder. That was just my way of doing it. It doesn't really matter. Now, I'm going to now start talking about specific conventions. You don't necessarily have to follow them. But the typical convention of writing a skill is to create a markdown file and to call it skill capital.md. So this is what I wrote. Now, I'm going to show you how does this skill actually work. I do want you guys to see like all the different aspects that I did. And then I'm also going to show you like sort of try to run this. Hopefully that works. So the first thing that you do that you are when you are creating a skill. Okay, I got another question. Okay, I'm going to answer these two and then I'll go into the skill path. Is skill an agent by itself, or it can be a sub-agent, or it can call agents inside the skill file? Again, I want to make it very clear. A skill is nothing. It is just a text file with a prompt. You run the skill to an agent. It's like, for example, okay, let's take this as an analogy. Let's say you write a recipe for creating butter chicken. Unless you give it to a chef, you won't actually get that food, right? That's the same idea. A skill is just a prompt. It doesn't do anything by itself. Now, it does actually, when you give it to an agent, that is the agent that will run the skill and they will do different things. I hope Nikhil answered your question. Isabella, are there different standards for different skills? And are these official standards? So these are kind of official conventions, Isabella. I don't know if there are specific one for specific domains. That's maybe not something I'm aware of. Maybe there are. But there are some general official conventions that people expect you to use. But I'll also say it's such a new world right now. It's very new, so the conventions might change a lot in the future. I would focus more on like how you write this. As long as broadly you have a good structure, I think that's fine. Yeah, I think the previous session was, and yes, version. Okay, so Steve, I think Golnaz's question was, and I think Steve, what you are asking is, what do you mean by version? So let's say I've written this skill that you people are saying. Let's say tomorrow I get some feedback. So what I can do is I can create a V2 of this skill, which is like a second version of this skill, which is an improvement. Where do you save the skill.md file? Okay, so this skill.md file is just saved in my file system. It's just like any other file. So it's just a very simple file that I have created. Now, I'm going to walk through this file, but it's just a simple file. I hope PL that helps. Now, once I created this file, this is the structure that I used for creating the skill, and this is following the official conventions. I'll share a link to that. So the first thing that you do is you sort of give it a name. So you give your skill a name, which is okay, the name of the skill is online research. The second thing that you do is you give it a description. So the description helps. Now think of it this way. A skill has to be used by the language model. So the description tells the language model what is this skill about. So this is about research a topic with source log, flag judgment calls, and human checkpoints used for comparisons, claims to verify. So I sort of wrote like a high level description of what is the purpose of this skill. And the third thing that you write is dependencies. Now, dependencies means what are the external things that the skills might need. In my case, I just needed web search, but you might need something else. You might need access to Jira. You might need access to, let's say, Asana or any other system that you're using. So this is where you can define that, okay, when the agent is running this skill, what is the external tools that it needs for running the skill? Now, so you describe essentially this high level metadata of the skill, but then you start to give it a sort of a description for the for the agent. The first thing that you do typically is give it a heading. So in this case, I gave it a heading of online research. I'll open this on the side. As you can see, the online research is showing up as this bold thing. That's because I gave it a heading. Remember, Markdown is essentially a formatted text file. So this hash gives it a heading. So it gave it online research. And then I also started to give it more information. I typically explained why have I written the skill this way. And then I sort of wrote this as a blurb of why this skill has to be done and what is its importance. The reason why this is important is, and again, you don't have to follow me exactly. This is an example. It tells the model what is at stake in this skill. Why is this really important? So it sort of like tells like that importance to the model that okay, this is an important thing. Make sure you are doing it right. So typically, it's good to explain why. Then I sort of wrote down the process that I want the model to do. So if you can see, this is again showing up as a subheading, and this is just a previewer that I have. And now I broke it down into, like I said, 5 steps. The first step was confirm scope before researching. So I can say before running any searches, restate the question back and confirm what would count as a good answer, what kinds of sources are acceptable, how deep this needs to go. Do not proceed to searching until this is confirmed. So now this is very important because the model first, I want the model to make sure that model and I am aligned on what is it that we want to research. This is a checkpoint. What that means is that the model has to pause before it actually moves ahead. And then only once I have told it that, okay, I'm aligned with you, then only it moves on. So that's the first step of the process that I gave it. And I told it explicitly, this is a checkpoint. Now, the second thing that I did was, okay, once you are done with that, step number 2, show show the source list before reading deeply. Now, this was an important thing. The model, I want the agent to go to online, but I wanted to sort of confirm all the sources it is using. And so that's the second step. Again, it's just a simple prompt, but the prompt is very like exact of what it needs to do. Ask if anything obvious is missing or if any source looks unreliable and should be dropped. So that's the second one. The third one is log every claim as it's found. Now, a claim in my world of online research essentially is any fact that you might want to like verify or you might want to make sure that those are the actual facts. So I'm asking it to log any claim that it finds. Then I'm also asking it to write down any judgment calls it made. So any decisions that the model made, I want the model to tell me that, okay, I'm making A decision, and I'm making a B decision. Again, I am a little paranoid about it. I don't want the model to like do the entire thing. So I want it to like tell me that, okay, what are the decisions that you made? What are the things that you actually, what was your thinking when you were doing certain things? So that it helps me sort of make sure that the model is on the right track. To flag any judgment calls that it has been made. Checkpoint before writing the synthesis. So this is a point that before the model sort of writes the entire thing, then it sort of like it has to confirm with me that okay, is it a point that okay, I have all this information. Are you ready? Do you want me to still write down the synthesis? And so this is a checkpoint for the model to ask me or the agent to ask me. Now, this is an additional thing. We'll talk about that, folks, in a second. I'm just going to write it if available. We'll talk about it in a second later what the evals file means. But the next step is deliver the report. They give me the final report and give me the log. And then I also give it some specific conditions that if you don't have evidence for some online research, just tell me that, okay, I do not have evidence. I do not know about this. Just tell me about that. And then I also tell the skill what this skill is does not do. So it doesn't make a decision for the person. It gathers and organizes evidence, not a recommendation dressed up as a fact. So I give it a lot of like, I give it a lot of like information of like what it has to do and what it doesn't have to do. And then I also give it a decision log format. Tell me like what the fact is, what the source is, how confident you are you making a judgment call, what's your reason. So I ask it to like show me your work. Like, you know how when we would do like proofs in math, sometimes the teacher would say, show me your work. So that's sort of the format that I would take. And then I also give it a report structure that, okay, this is the actual report that this is how I want the report to look like. And then some troubleshooting, which is that if you run into any issues, how do you actually solve them? So I'm giving model a lot of abilities here. It's not a simple prompt. I'm telling it like what to do, what not to do, when to ask me for feedback, when to like check what to do if it runs into any issues. It sort of gives the model a very disciplined guidance for doing a skill, which in our case is a particular task of doing online research. Now, before I take questions, I am going to show you folks how this actually looks, and then hopefully that works, and then we'll take some questions. Um, I got another question. Do we have to use only open source dependencies, or can we use private dependencies as well? So Kirthana, great question. Um, so if you are, again, I think your question comes when you are using an agent at a programmatic manner. If you are using a private dependency, then you will have to program it with your model. It's not something that will come out of the box. You will have to do it. And for folks who are getting confused, a lot of us use the models using the UI, the Chat GPT and the Claude UI that we have, that the chatbot. But others, a lot of folks also talk directly to the model who are more on the programming side and sort of communicate that way. You have a lot more customizability of the external tools that you can provide. Kirthana, let me know if I answered that. Will a local model be able to do web search if asked to do so through the MD file, or does the model need some tools to do the web search? Great questions, Swapnil. So the local model, the skill doesn't need that access, but the model has to be given that tool. So you will have to set up the web search tool in the local model for it to be able to do web search. Let me know if I answered your question. Okay, amazing. Okay, so now we have this skill file. We're going to run it in a very, very dumb way. So let's go to my Claude. I have it somewhere. Okay, I have it on incognito. Now, the one thing that I often do is I make sure that I know which model I'm running. So I'm running Sonnet 5. I am going to upload this file, not here. Da, 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 da. So you see, this is the research, the skill.md file. So I'm going to say using this skill, perform online research on. Does anyone want to give me a topic on Zoom chat? I'm going to pick up whatever first topic comes up, as long as it's a good topic. Why do I run it incognito? Because I don't want you guys to know how all I'm using uh, Claude. So it's very simple. That's why I run it incognito. Use this skill, perform online research on girls' education in Afghanistan. Sure. And we also got animal conservation, but I said I'll pick up the first one. Let's see what happens. So it's gonna try to run this skill. So now you see the first thing that it does, and this was the thing that I told it to do, right? If you go back here, it talks about why the first step is confirm scope before searching. So if I go here, now it is going to ask me questions for narrowing down the scope. So let's say I want to do a broad overview, and let's say what sources should be acceptable. Let's say news and NGO human rights reports, or maybe I want to keep it. Maybe I keep it this again. This is the choice that you have. How deep should I go? Let's say quick grid overview. So it did the first step. It actually asked me, it clarified the scope, and it didn't just go on like a YOLO of doing it itself. Now, it got the broad overview. Now it's looking at like, it's sort of trying to figure things out. You can open this here to also see what it is doing. But now it's going to like show me the candidate list of resources, of sources. Remember, I gave the skill that show me the source list before running it deeply. So I'm gonna wait here, and now it's gonna give me the different sources, the VOA News, Feminist Major Formation, blah blah blah. And so you have a lot of like different sources, and then it's like, okay, there are certain sources that it has not included, and then you say, does it look right, or is there a source you would like to be dropped? I'm gonna tell it the sources look okay to me. Let's see. And again, folks, this is where the checkpoints come in. This is why a skill is very cool because it can, like, you can guide it in the right way when you want. Let's say it is doing this. I'm going to look at some questions. It may need, Prateek, so to your question, for most people who are just using Claude and stuff, I think just that side of that, the Claude or ChatGPT interfaces are fine. But if you're building your own agent, you do need a memory and a lot of other detailed management for sure. Amy Wong, in this case, can skill log in as someone to an academic database? Great question. That's very, that, I would say that a skill is not the one that is logging in, the agent is. So as long as the agent has access, has the credentials, only then it can happen. A skill can't log in, it's just a dump file. Another question. Sorry, how did you integrate the skill into the tool? I'll quickly show that again, Halima, but it's just uploading the skill. Okay, so now once I said the sources are good, now it gave me a decision log and it tells me like what is a claim, what is how confident it is, whether it's a judgment call. So the judgment call is important because I want to know like is it actually rooting itself in facts or is it something that the model is deciding for itself? Like here it is making a judgment call versus the other ones which are not really a judgment call. So now it has all of this. It also like sort of talks about the specific judgment call it makes. And now it's going to ask me do you want me to go ahead and write dependencies, write the log? So I'm going to say yes, write the report. And now it's going to actually write the report. And yes, Halima, I'll quickly show that after this. Tool and dependency are same. That's sorry. The question was, is tool and the dependency are same? Um, yes, and I would say yes. I would put all the tools inside a dependency of all the tools that a agent requires because you want to predefine what are the different things that an agent can do. Okay, so now it's going to write the report. Um, but again, like I'm hoping that people are getting the idea that that the core idea is that you're giving a structured workflow and that workflow is interactive so that you can guide it in the right way. Okay, I have a couple of more questions while it is writing. What if a workflow requires using multiple skills? How does that look like? That's a great question, Gulnaz. So when you have a workflow that requires multiple skills, so rather than having one skill.md file, let's say there are one workflow that uses two other skills, you will have to create three different MD files, and then you will have to say that, okay, when you are doing this, run this other skill. So you can totally do that, but you will just have to tell it very explicitly that use the other skill. What if the results aren't what you want at this point? How do you correct it? So let's look at a correction. What I can say is, okay, I do not like this. Uh, Go back to the, let's say, what was the process like? Go back to the show the source list step. Okay, go back to the source list step and show me the sources again. So now what's going to happen is it's going to go back to that step. So that's often like that's like a really cool way of solving this problem. Once it's a skill, it knows how to go back and forth in the process. So you can always go back at the step where you think a problem happened. Um, Let me know, Dean, if I answered your question or if you were asking something else. Asif, can we run this skill in a corporate AI agent or model? Asif, that's a question for your IT. I can't really answer that because each company has their own policies around it. Avneet, can the model hallucinate even after having a proper skill file? Yes, that can still happen because that's the nature of the brain of the models. what you want to do in that case is to have these checkpoints in your skill. Just like I have these checkpoints in my skill where I look at the sources, I look at all the different claims that those sources are making and look at how confident the model is about them. So having those checkpoints, like having that deliberate checkpoint, is the way for you to sort of like make sure that the hallucinations are less. But it will never be completely zero, which is why the more checkpoints you have, the more it will sort of help. Uh, can the model? Okay, I hope Avneet that answered your question. When I ask questions from different categories, how does the AI decide which tool to use? So a couple of different ways. The one way can be that on top here, you can write down what are the different kinds of skills that the model can use. But if so that can help the model, but then sometimes it can use other skills as well. So that's a judgment call that the agent can make. Let me know, Kithana, if I answered. What if I don't want it to just back up but correct the outputs? You just tell the model. You can be like, hold on, let's just fix this. So I can be like, okay, actually, all the steps are fine apart from the last writing the summary step. Make it more succinct, let's say. And now it will change that. So you can always go. So once you have given it a workflow, Dean, that's the biggest benefit of a skill. You can go to different steps and sort of correct them. So you can just go and be like, oh, and then you that this I didn't like this, change this, and then it can sort of change that report for you. Uh, Let me know, Dean, if that answered. Are you going to share this skill with us? Yes, I will share this skill when I share the presentation and the video. It will be on the meetup group. I'll show you guys in the end. Are there any best practices for storing, organizing the skills in a code base or a project? Yep, I'm going to show that after this demo is done, Gulnaz. Mangwang, or should we create a V2 markdown file? No, I will be sending you guys this skill, but I would only create a V2 when I'm making a change to a skill. So there's no need for a V2 file, but you can just use this skill.md file as well. And now we have a different report. Now, obviously, I'm not checking the actual report itself, but I hope that as a broad idea, you can see the difference between a simple task-based prompt versus a detailed skill that you have written. Now, one thing I do want to quickly answer, somebody asked me how did I run the skill. So the dumb way of running this skill, and I will now try and run it here. Let's say I want to run this skill on ChatGPT. So the dumb way of running this skill would be you go here, you find the file, you find the skill.md file, you open it. So I had this file and I can say, okay, run this skill. And let's see, there was another topic that had come up, animal conservation, on the topic of animal conservation. And when I hit enter, uh, most of the times, ChatGPT, all of these tools are just able to read the skill file, and then they can start to. Now, there you go. It is starting to do this. It's starting to ask me to confirm the scope or specify a narrower scope. So it will start to like give you that sort of it will start to run your skill. You just have to give it a file, because at the end of the day a skill file is just like a big prompt, right? It's just sort of a very structured way of doing things. So the same thing on Google Gemini too. You can just upload the file and then give it the topic and it will run it. I am going to assume that answered the question of who I think Halima was asking about, like how do we use this. Can you have the AI auto update the MD file depending on your feedback? Absolutely. So let's say I learned a new way. I have an improvement in mind. You can ask the AI to change the skill file and make some changes, and that can be the V2, the second version of your skill. If you want to be really really disciplined about it, you can even add versioning here. So you can write version 1. So this is the first version of the skill. And then over time, as it gets better, you can do version 2, version 3, version 4, so on and so forth. Can I run the skill in the free ChatGPT account? Does the skill file need to be a .md extension? As long as the skill, so my recommendation is that the skill should be a markdown. The extension doesn't matter as long as you're writing it as a markdown. As long as you are, I think you can just upload it. Halima. So you save the skill wherever you create it, and the tool has an area where you can upload it and then apply it to your search. Absolutely. So anytime now I want to do any kind of an online research, all I have to do is upload that file. I will give you folks some easy examples of how to make it run in a much more easier way. But I just upload that skill file and I tell the LLM using the skill, perform online search on this topic, and it will just do it. Let me know, Halima, if I answered your question. Where did you click to upload? Sorry. No, all good. So here you typically have a plus button like this. So here when you click plus, you have add files or photos. When you go to Chat GPT, you click plus, you will find files and photos and files. They were trying to be creative as compared to Claude. And you go to Gemini, you have upload files. So like there's always like a plus button. There's always like a button to upload the files. Okay, I'm gonna give it a few more if people have questions. How do integrate skill with a tool? Do you add a section in the skill file and specify the tool's name and location? Great question, Gulnas. Okay, so let's sort of do it a different way, just so that I can give an example. Let's say you want this particular tool to use for some reason the tool of what can be a tool for it. If you wanted to create a Google Doc, okay? So let's say in one of the dependencies, I write Google Doc Access, okay? And in the end, I go here in the deliver the report, and then I write it as a Google Doc. So now, in the most dumbest ways, this is going to give it access. So this can sort of give it access to the skill for a tool, because Google Doc Access, that's a tool that your agent needs to have. Now, whether or not your agent has that access is its own separate problem, because it may or may not have access to that tool. But as long as you have access, you can mention it in dependencies and then you can use it wherever in your actual prompt. How do we integrate skill with a tool? Okay, I think I answered your question, Golnaz. When you reference the description at the top of the Markdown file, you mentioned running end to end. What does end to end stand for? Research a topic with a source flag, blah, 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 instead of. So what that means is I'm telling the model that don't just do the entire thing. Make sure you are asking me, the human. Running end to end would mean that, you know how this was a very interactive skill. End to end would mean that there is no interaction. It just does it. And there is no feedback that it is getting from me. Let me know, Dinoska, if I answered your question. Can an AI skill be proprietary? They can be. There are a lot of free skills that are available, and there are also skills that are owned by companies like Anthropic or any company for that matter that are specific for their workflows, which you can't just copy paste and use. So yes, there can be a proprietary thing. Mine, this skill is not proprietary. This is not even the best skill to use, but this is just for an example. But there are a lot of skills that are proprietary as well. Okay, awesome. Now, I do want to mention one thing, and I know we're getting close to time, just so that folks understand. When I was writing the skill, right, I didn't just sort of create the skill by myself. I did rely on a specific standard, and let's call it agent skills. No, not this. Okay, sorry, guys. Okay, so there is a standard. There is a standard that exists. I'm going to share a link here. I'll share it after the session too, of how do you write the skills. And if you are somebody who is sort of writing a skill, I would start at this level in the best practices. This is a very good resource for you to learn how to write skills. Some of this is more geared toward programmers, but you can still use it for whatever field that you are on. So I was using this as my official convention for uh, writing a skill. A great related question. So is prompt engineering skills the same as, well, skills writing skills, or skills are a subset of prompts? I would say prompt is I would say prompt is a subset of a skill in a way, because think of like prompt as, now this is a very bad example, but like prompt as an alphabet and skill as a word. Like you, like prompt engineering is your foundation, but skill sits on top where you use not one prompt engineering techniques but multiple together to write a skill. This guide will give you a lot of good stuff that of how to start writing skills. But if you can remember the basics of like, give it a clear target, make sure it's interactive, make sure it's asking for human feedback. Those are the basic things, but there's a lot of stuff here that you can learn about, like how to write good, effective skills. Let me know, Isabella, if I answered. Can you program a skill to access and run commands in multiple apps like Gmail and Instagram? Totally, Dean. You will have to give the. So again, I want to clarify. The skill is not the program. The agent will have to do it. So as long as your agent has access to Gmail and Instagram, yes, your skill can totally use Gmail and Instagram. The cybersecurity company use skills to do cybersecurity stuff? Yes. I work in a cybersecurity company and we have our skills for doing penetration testing and all the different kinds of cybersecurity testing that automatically tells an agent how to test an application. So yes, absolutely. Okay, so you can go here and read about all the different skills. If you do want to look at just a general place for different kinds of skills, there is like this repository, this website that exists, which has a lot of different skills. Now, you will have to find the ones that are useful for you, but I do always say that if you are using a skill from online, make sure to read it properly, because if your skill tells your agent to do something wonky, that might cause you harm, that might cause your software system a harm. So make sure you are sort of like being very careful about it. Having said that, there are a lot of skills that you can find online that people have written. Let's say I can go here and let me find online research one. Let's see if somebody else has a skill on it. So there's an online eval, there's an online shopping skill. So now this has a specific skill, this has a particular use case. So you will find a lot of different skills. There's a research tool skills that somebody has made. And so you can find a lot of different skills online. I do sort of recommend to sort of like just create your own skill for your own workflows first and follow like sort of follow through the different best practices of like making them interactive. Because oftentimes what the workflow that you want to automate might be very specific to you. So I always try to start there, but I'm sure like you can find a lot of skills online. Uh, Now, before I move on to the final part of how to use it across different places, uh, I do want to pause. Any more questions? Fahad, yes, absolutely. So the question is, are skills useful for teaching yourself things from online, such as learning a spoken language or learn music theory, etc., with minimal mistakes? Absolutely. So that's a great question. So I am sure there is a teacher out there that has written a skill, let's say an AI skill for learning a topic. Let's say did somebody put it somewhere? Let's see. I usually check GitHub, and if you go here, there might be some skills. Okay, again, I'm doing it live, but essentially what I'm saying, which hopefully people understand, is you can like, I'm sure you can search online. I'm just doing a very cursory search, but I'm sure you can like search online to find skills that other teachers have written, or people with experts have written that can help you learn in a more organized manner. If you can't find anything, somebody else had suggested that you can actually like just go to your, where is my Claude? It's somewhere here. And you can ask it to, okay, find me a skill that helps me with online learning on a topic and then run that skill. But yes, having a skill for doing your individual learning will help you as long as the skill is written in a good way, essentially. Let me know, Fahad, if I answered your question. If we want to reduce token usage while ensuring the AI does not hallucinate, what is the best approach? I don't know that, Kirthana. It's an open question. I actually even think that it's very hard to answer it depending on your context. All I can say is that the more disciplined we are in our skill usage, and and the work that we want. And the more very targeted we are, it will automatically help you to reduce hallucinations and token count. But as of now, not to my knowledge, there is like a one short way of doing it. Skills definitely, if written well, can help with hallucinations and even with token stuff because they don't go and do the entire thing. You can stop them if they are going wrong. But it really depends on the context. Any other questions, folks? Okay, amazing. I know we only have 5 minutes. I do want to quickly talk about this. Like, how do you actually use the skills across the tools? Now, I'm gonna do the dumb version and then a little smarter version. The dumb version I already showed you. You click plus, you upload the skill file, and then you just run it on the topic that you want to run it on. Now, if you want to use like specific things, I can quickly mention how it works. So now, if you go to, let's say, Claude, they have this thing called customize, and inside customize they have skills, and inside here you can add a skill. So you can go here, click on skill, you can click add, you can click on upload a skill, and then you can, let's say I want to use this skill.md, and now this skill file is uploaded into my Claude, which I was the one who created. I can even share this skill file, so I can click on share and then I can share it if I have a particular subscription. So let's say I have this online research skill now available. And now if I go back to my Claude, usually I can just do / online research and then I can just run this skill. So this is like a sort of a smarter way where you can click on customize, upload the skill in Claude, and it will automatically then be available. Now, if you are using ChatGPT, that tends to happen through this custom GPTs concept where you click on create, and then here is the part where like you can click on configure, you can add your instructions. So in this case, let's say I create an online research, helps me do online research, and I can say run the skill, and then I click on upload files. I do this, I'm gonna say use the uploaded skill, and then if I do create, let's say only me, save. It takes a second. But now this is my own custom chat GPT that is using my own skill file. So again, not a lot of people use custom GPTs. So I just wanted to do like a quick overview that you can sort of like create your own sort of a space which uses your skill. I still oftentimes just upload the file. I don't usually do that. If you are somebody who uses Gemini, you would know the concept of a gem. So what you can do here is you can create a new gem. You can go here, you can write online research, and then here you can like sort of add your skill. So you can say run the attached skill file, and I'm doing it in a dumb way. There's a lot of like better ways and you spend more time in it. I click on add files, I upload the file here, and now every time you're sort of running it, then it can start using the skill file. And so there are different specific concepts that do exist if you want to do more advanced stuff. But if you want to just like get started, I would just say upload your skill file. I think usually in my experience, the first important thing is to be able to learning how are these skills written or reading online skills that are available so that you can actually find a good skill, how you use them. You can upload the file and make it use like that. If not, you can totally like just sort of create these specific things that exist in all these different tools. There are a lot of tutorials on YouTube available of how to create specific of them, but this session was more based on the foundations of skills, and that's what I wanted to sort of focus on a little more of. Now, I am gonna pause now. Any questions, folks, in the skills domain? We are near the end. Any questions, anything that people want to bring up? This is more open-ended regarding skills or in general in this world. I know, folks, this was a heavy session and you folks are real troopers who have stayed till now. But any more questions, folks? Where can we write the MD file? You can just write it on your system, whichever editor you use. I'm using Visual Studio Code. If you use Notepad, you can use that. If you use Obsidian, you can use that. So anything that you use for writing text files, you can just do that. SNN, if you have questions, please do ask. And thanks, Isabella and Jennifer and Mang. If people are starting to leave, I do want to share a couple of things. Please do follow us on Curious Skill. Um, we put a lot of updates there, so we love getting more people there. And if you folks liked our sessions, we do intend to do some future ones as well. So please keep an eye on our meetup group. I'm going to share a link to that. That's where you will find all the YouTube recording and video and everything there. Thanks a lot, folks. Thanks a lot for the kind words. That's about it for then. If there are no more questions, we ended right on time. And folks, we will share the video and everything tomorrow on the Meetup group, but please join us on LinkedIn or also join us on Meetup. You folks are great. This is a very complicated session. It's not easy to learn writing skills, but it's a starting point. I'm hoping it sort of helps you all. Uh, Thanks a lot, folks. This is the end. Have a good rest of your weekend. Stay safe. See ya.